Flow state. You've probably heard the phrase before. A moment when everything just clicks. Whether it's in a sport, video game, or any random situation, you might have felt it too. Time seems to slow down, distractions fade, and everything feels effortless. In football, there are moments that feel almost supernatural, when footballers play as if they can't put a foot wrong. It's not just the Messis and Ronaldos of the world who tap into this. Players like Andre Arshavin and Lucas Moura have also taken advantage of it, delivering some unforgettable performances. Flow state is very real, and it's one of the biggest secrets behind some of football's most legendary performances. But it's also something that's often overlooked by pundits, managers, and even players themselves. With all the focus now on physical training, tactics, and stats, the mental side of the game, specifically achieving flow, doesn't get the attention it deserves. But what exactly is flow state, and how do football's elite, and even some unlikely heroes, tap into this zone where they seem unstoppable? To answer the first question, flow was a term created by a Hungarian-American psychologist. It describes that feeling when you're fully immersed in an activity, completely focused, losing track of time and performing at your absolute best. It's that sweet spot between being challenged but not overwhelmed, where everything just feels right and you're in the zone. Like flow state, you've probably also heard the phrase locked in or peaking before. Although it's sometimes used as a joke, there is still real science behind it. When someone hits their optimal state, their brain stops overthinking and just acts off of pure reaction. They don't need to think about the next move because their brain and body are completely in sync. Faster decisions, sharper focus, and complete confidence. For footballers, this is what separates the good from the elite. But how does this actually look on the pitch? We see it regularly from players at the top, those who seem to enter into the zone game after game. Yet, some of the most unforgettable examples come from players who aren't consistently world-class, but have shown just how powerful being in full flow can be. Andre Arshavin wasn't the kind of player you'd expect to be mentioned alongside legends, but for one night at Anfield, he was untouchable. Liverpool were chasing a Premier League title and Arshavin was chasing history. In a game that ended up being an instant Premier League classic, Arshavin stepped into pure flow state and delivered 4 clinical goals. His touch, his timing, his precision, everything was perfect. He wasn't just playing well, it felt like the game was bending to his will. Arshavin's performance was one for the history books, but he's not the only player to produce a stunning display away from home. Lucas Moura is another player who locked in when it mattered most. Tottenham were dead and buried in the Champions League semi-final. Ajax had all but secured their spot in the final.
De Ligt is in there and steers in the header. And Ziyech is that anyway back.
But then, Lucas Moura happened. 3 goals, each one as unlikely as the next. At the time, Moura wasn't even a consistent starter for Spurs, but in those 45 minutes, he reached a different level. Every chance he took ended in the back of the net and he had secured Tottenham's place in the Champions League final.
They're sliding, it's in! Lucas Moura with the hat-trick goal! Spurs are going to the Champions League final!
As we mentioned earlier, world-class players are able to find themselves in the zone more regularly than the average player. From the many performances we could choose from, here are a few that truly show the extraordinary talent of football's elite when they enter that near unbeatable state. Let's take it back to Old Trafford in 2003, the Champions League quarter-finals. Ronaldo Nazario, R9, walked onto the pitch against one of the toughest defences in Europe. That night wasn't just about Ronaldo being good, it was as if he was playing a different game entirely. Every time the ball came to him, it felt like he had all the time in the world. His touch was perfect and decision-making was flawless. He scored a hat-trick and left United fans giving him a standing ovation. Although Real Madrid lost the game 4-3, they still won 6-5 in aggregate and proceeded to the next round. This performance is still talked about to this day, an iconic game that showcased just how unstoppable R9 could be when he hit his optimal state. Ronaldo's mastery that night left fans in awe, but if there's one player who seems to live in flow state, it's Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi in flow state is basically football in poetry. We see him hit this level so often that we almost take it for granted, but his 4-goal demolition of Arsenal in the 2010 Champions League quarter-finals is a perfect example. Arsenal thought they had the upper hand with an early lead, but Messi had other plans. Not only did he score 4 goals, but he made it look easy. His dribbling was unstoppable, his passes were perfectly weighted, and every bounce of the ball seemed to go his way. He simply never looked like missing. From playing a high line to a low block, to constant pressing and rough challenges, nothing Arsenal did to stop Messi worked. At only age 22, this was the performance that announced Messi to the world and entered him into the GOAT conversations. Cristiano Ronaldo is of course another player who hits flow state regularly, but the way he does it has evolved over time. Early in his career, it was more about flair in his performances. In a high-stakes El Clasico in 2012, with a scoreline at 1-1, Ronaldo scored the winning goal and delivered the iconic Calma celebration, showing he was in full control. His goal helped Real Madrid secure an important victory in the La Liga title race that they went on to win. In 2019, we saw a more mature version of Ronaldo locking in. Juventus were down 2-0 in the Champions League against Atletico Madrid. They needed a miracle to advance. Ronaldo was constantly being mocked by Atletico fans before the match, but in one of the biggest moments of his career, he stepped up, scored a hat-trick and single-handedly sent Juventus to the next round. Just as Ronaldo has evolved his game over time, Neymar has shown time and again that he can rise to the occasion. When Neymar hits his flow, it's football at its most aesthetic. As seen in Barcelona's 6-1 comeback against PSG in 2017. Barcelona needed a miracle to overturn a 4-0 deficit, and Neymar stepped up. He was everywhere. He scored twice.
Neymar hits it. Oh, what a goal! Neymar steps up. It's in the net!
Assisted the final goal in injury time.
Left foot and plays it to the box. It's in the net! It's in the net! It's in...
And orchestrated the greatest comeback in Champions League history. When Neymar is peaking, it's like watching a street footballer play with total freedom. It's unpredictable and fearless. That night, it was like Neymar was writing his own script, and PSG didn't have a clue how to stop him. So why doesn't flow state get more attention in football? The simple answer: you can't see it. Stats can tell you how many goals were scored, how fast a player ran, or how many passes were completed. But flow, that's all happening inside the player's mind. And because it's invisible, it's often ignored. For players like Arshavin and Moura, whose careers were defined by flashes of brilliance rather than consistent dominance, their moments in the zone might be overlooked or dismissed as anomalies. Football today is dominated by data. From expected goals to pass completion rates, football is becoming more about numbers and less about what's happening in the minds of players. Analysts, pundits, and even coaches are trained to focus on the measurable parts of the game. These metrics are easy to analyse and provide concrete data on a player's performance. As football is a highly physical sport, much of the focus is on physical conditioning at the elite level. Strength, speed and stamina are the traits that pundits and coaches often focus on. There's also a strong emphasis on hard work. We celebrate players who give 110% on the pitch, but mentally peaking is usually subtle. Players in flow look as if they're moving with less effort even when they're playing at their peak, which challenges the typical narrative that working harder always leads to better results. This makes flow state difficult to appreciate in a sport like football, where physicality and visible effort are often celebrated above all. Recently, there has definitely been a push, especially in the world of sports psychology, to understand the mental side of the game. But for the most part, flow state remains an afterthought in football development. And this is where the potential lies. Players who master their mental game, who can consistently access this zone, don't just become good players, they become game changers. So if flow state is so powerful, can it be taught? The answer, yes, but it's not something you can just switch on. Entering this state requires both mental and physical preparation. While it's often seen as a natural gift, it's really a psychological state any player can achieve with the right approach. Take Cristiano Ronaldo. Known for his relentless work ethic, he spends hours visualizing key moments in games, getting his mind ready to enter flow.
Yeah, sometimes I do it to visualize a few points that can happen in a game. I like to do it. And sometimes it's my subconscious that do it by himself.
Yeah.
Sports psychologists help athletes achieve flow by teaching them how to block out distractions, manage pressure, and stay focused. Techniques like mindfulness, breathing exercises, and visualization are all tools used by athletes to prepare their minds to enter this mental zone. It's about finding the right balance between challenge and skill. If the task is too easy, you get bored. Too hard and you get overwhelmed. The sweet spot is where flow happens. And that's why players like Messi, Ronaldo and Neymar enter this zone so often. They've spent years mastering the skill to the point where they can access that perfect balance more frequently than the average player. Flow state remains one of football's most intriguing and effective elements. It's the difference between a good performance and a legendary one, where a player, regardless of who they are, can become unstoppable. For players like Messi and Ronaldo, flow state has cemented their legacies. But for players like Arshavin and Moura, it was a rare instance of greatness. A moment when they exceeded expectations and delivered something unforgettable. While football recently has been dominated by numbers and tactics, the game at its core will always be a game of moments. It's not something you can see on a stat sheet, but when it happens, you'll know it. The game feels different, and so does the player.